Welcome to Portals of Perception and to the Universalis Project number 23. Welcome, Kyriaki and Karen.
Hello, Karen. Hello, Aviv. Good to be with you.
Welcome, Aviv and Kyriaki, and it's good to be here.
We actually landed mid-flight, Universalis 22. I seem to never be able to estimate the time that everything takes, and what I think will be a 75-minute recording becomes a two-part, 3 hours or more. So we just decided to make an editorial pause at the end of 22, episode 22, and we are launching here episode 23 to continue the story. And what I'm about to do, I'm about to bring the slides and run us through the first set of slides we covered. Then I'll bring your voices, and then we launch into the new content. And hopefully we'll be able to accomplish this without needing to do part 3. So here we go. Okay, so we indeed called the Universalis Project 22, we called self-leadership in the violet intensification, which described the intensification of the epochal shift that we are tracking. And so we're calling this one the currency of the future as one of the key themes we will explore. What we covered in episode 22 was, first of all, the backstory of how this body of work we're developing here arose, what was the event in which it emerged, why did that event come together, and what was the opening practice, attunement practice we started with, and the significance and the really process methodology, process technology of focusing on qualities as a renewable source of connection and generation and discovery. And that led us into slide 2, which invited the awareness of self-leadership, the significance of self-leadership. Why do we describe the importance of being your own self-initiated, self-arising, self-regulated, self-aligning, self-authoring human? Why this is such a significant orientation and way of being, and why continually being generative and engaging in a committed way in your healing work, development work, refinement work, all those, why these are essential dimensions of being a human in times of evolutionary change, both for yourself, for your own well-being and capacity to be the fullest human you can be, and also at the same time as part of the partnering dance with the universe in which we are called to play our part. And that led us into slide 3, which from the rise of the significance of individuated self-authoring human, the significance of distributed leadership, and why and how in this time of rapid change, we actually need to come together as pods, as crews, as teams, as networks of diverse capacities and talents to facilitate the forensic examination of what is occurring below the line that we want to perhaps release, and what is evolutionarily arising for us as the leading edge of conscious evolution in the universe, because we are the only species that that was initiated into conscious life, a life that's conscious of itself. So in a way, we are the carriers of the torch of consciousness in the universe, and it carries responsibility. In business terms, you'd say the universe placed with us fiduciary responsibility, the fiduciary responsibility of consciousness and where consciousness leads. And implicit in that was the permission of choice, the spirit of the thou mayest choice, which allows us to mess things up and create a lot of destruction, and also allows us to regeneratively refine and evolve. So this slide 3 talked about the importance of epoch discovery labs, where we track what is occurring and where we together co-create wombs that birth possibilities, midwife possibilities. And that led us into truly recognizing that in one way, dying and rebirthing is a biological fact from the beginning of time, because at a cellular level, we are dying and rebirthing all the time. What we were describing is how, because of the intensification of the epochal change, whereas in some centuries, say the 6th to the 7th and the 8th centuries, even though these were centuries where early Renaissance phases emerged to potentially birth a renewal in humanity, in the larger scale of things, it was more a continuation of the same. It's in the last couple of centuries that we've been unlocking powerful technologies that are accelerating technological shift, and also with it, everything else in the realms of potential that is enveloping and causing and catalyzing human evolution in the conscious sense of what is it we choose to do humans together, that is accelerating to a speed where one can be invited into the recognition that part of ourselves are dying and other parts are emerging anew as one epoch is fading and a new epoch is arriving and emerging. And that led us into slide 5, where we reflected on the acknowledgement, the recognition that there are different speeds involved. And the process of something coming to an end can be sudden and acute. The endeavor of bringing to life a new possibility can take a million efforts in one direction until it comes to its fuller fruition. And the recognition that those asymmetrical natures in the planetary domain, that an end of something and the birthing and the maturation of something, we appear to experience these processes in an asymmetrical way. So therefore, we need to choreograph, or I don't know if choreograph is the right word, we need to cultivate rather the psychological and character resilience to be able to accommodate those differential speeds and give them the right placement and the right significance. Because we're each going to experience the final transition of death. And if you are a practicing Buddhist, then in some streams in the Buddhist practice, you'd actually be spending the most of your life meditating on that moment. And you'd actually place yourself in the area where the dying bodies are in the various graveyards to acclimatize in your mind to the end of the physical vessel such that you can be summoned in yourself to the development and refinement of the awareness to bring up the energy from the lower centers to the higher centers of awareness, to center your being on that part that is not going to die. That's part of that practice. We are not doing this in the Buddhist way, in the Buddhist practice. We are more in the inviting this as an accompanying nature of living at the leading edge of consciousness, living at the leading edge of the unfolding epoch, and being ambassadorial for the process of change, for the process of transformation, as one epoch is dying and a new epoch is emerging, in which to be a functioning human with a service orientation, one would want to cultivate these capacities to be able to metabolize and dialysize in our awareness and consciousness those presences and essences and domains of intelligence that will give rise and be supportive to essentially to life itself, to the process of life as it seeks to arise through us. So that's me trying to, in 10 minutes, rethread through the previous 90 minutes, although as I listened to what I was saying, most of it appeared through different language than the way it appeared in the previous ones, which in a way validates that we are engaged with a live process. We're not we're not playing any musical score that has been written. That's the sense of it. We are rather at the leading edge of discovery, trying to track where this process leads us, listening through the unconscious to how the process of collapse is informing us, an implosion, and the process of rebirth and emergence. So let me make a pause here and bring your voices, and then we'll proceed to number 6.
Yeah, the trace that you have just done, while you were narrating, it brought to mind we started off with, and the thread carried on very deeply through the idea of self-leadership, self-authoring, and self-responsibility within that. Within that, it moved to the idea of distributed leadership, where there's a collective of individuals who are pioneering in a way their self-leadership, but in a way that comes together with shared purpose, shared missions, shared intent. And the thread that you just wove through to do with the human choice and consciousness and the unfolding of the epoch and the evolutionary integration, which is at the heart of the Universalis Project. It's an extraordinary platforming of 3 powerful motivations that are being brought together. And this is unusual because often the individual is focused upon the ways of psychology and the ways of the world, but to bring together these 3 in a way that they are interwoven. And the notion that we have spoken about, but not necessarily on these calls, is to do with the tethering, where you have a self-tethering to the value of your life and what you contribute, and then the tethering to the mutuality of the shared purpose, but within the greater tethering of human purpose and the evolution of humanity. And those three are possibly a way of platforming into this part two of where we are going.
Yes, absolutely. I so love the three tetherings, the idea of the three tetherings that in a way permeate all these first 5 points, and just looking forward to the next with the predisposition of how really to be forensic and assistive in a midwifery way, because when there are tectonic shifts, it's sure that the landscape will change. It will not be the same. So trying to hold on to the old landscape, it's a bit utopic. So when there are tectonic shifts, there's going to be a new landscape, and how to really help midwife the new with, let's say, the less pain, the less distraction, and towards a higher alignment. And I see that all the changes as we grow as humanity is to include more, is to embrace more, it's to metabolize and refine more. So towards that direction.
Well, thank you for those openings. And yes, the three tetherings will reappear here in a moment or two in one of the next slides. So they permeate this work absolutely. And so let us, with that, lead into slide 6, please, Karen.
Number 6, big shape-shifting moves. We are witnessing shattering developments across every domain: geopolitical, economic, cultural, scientific, and technological realms. The layers of the modern blue operating system, the global infrastructure of agreements, norms, and institutions are dissolving and disintegrating. This is not merely a collapse of systems. It is a violent disruption that unravels the very fabric of beliefs, perceptions, and values. Each facet of this transformation calls for its own discovery lab, a dedicated space to center, regulate, and sift through what must be released and what is ripe for transformation, ready to be reconfigured in a new context.
So it ends with three tetherings, in a way, by inviting us to, number one, be regulated and centered in yourself through whatever it is that you are observing and studying, such that you don't take yourself offline, but rather that you stay engaged, so that together with others, there can be a process that facilitates the ripening of what is ready to be reconfigured inside a new evolutionary context. So, yeah, what what this relates to is the recognition that inside the sevenfold fractal, the function of indigo is the harvesting and merging and transference of all that occurred in the previous 6 5 or 6 progressions and patterns that appears in a small way and appears in the civilizational epochal sense with the needing to metabolize through all the previous fractals to, in a way, recapitulate the development that the epoch was engineering through humanity, and in the process of which to balance, recast, redeem, heal, facilitate emergence and evolution. So it's easy or pretty obvious to look at the world today and say, which is what I'm going to say now is a statement you'll hear from many people, that we now have in major democracies all over the world the rise of authoritarian tendencies, authoritarian leaders, and that partly that occurred on one side of the political theater. Some will say it occurred because people have lost track of the significance of the rise of liberal democracies and what had to be done to win those achievements through the modernity project. That the more liberal left leaning will offer that narrative, which is general society has lost the historic sense of the significant achievements of the modern project and the institutions of what we describe in the Blue Operating System, the ethical and ontological foundations of the system of law and all that was won through the separation of powers and the separation to 3 branches of government. They will say that we have the rise of authoritarian leaders because society abdicated and became largely ignorant, and the younger generation failed to know what needed to be invested to win this. That would be often the narrative on the left side of the political equation. The right side has a different story, which is that it sees that what the modern and the postmodern worldviews brought essentially abdicated and left behind the importance of traditional values, some things that we touched in the latter part of the previous episode, Karen, when you talked about appreciating the essences of our parents' generation, the people that came through Second World War, the essence of the call for duty, the need to serve the family, the larger family, including serve the nation when you need to. So, and that we've become so superficially obsessed with short-term self-aggrandized pleasures. That would be the claim and the criticism of the conservative, the right side of the political equation. Now, the truth is they're of course both right, but what they are missing is what we're trying to track here, in the sense that what emerged through Blue, which integrated the capacity to integrate conflicts and find peaceful ways of managing differences, gave rise to an elite class that created distance and separation between the larger populace and their elected elite. So part of what we've seen in the rise of Trump and his second presidency, second term, and what we see in other countries in Europe, and the shattering shifts underway in terms of global realignments, what those represent from an epochal point of view, if you for a minute skip the detailed analysis of the blue and the indigo, it comes to the violet, and what the violet does is whatever has matured or evolved but left bugs in the system, it will be demolished, will be broken, so that it will have to be reconstructed with corrective measures inside it. Because again, if you embrace a universalis premise, where the human is coming to full engagement with the universe, well, whatever has flawed premise in its foundation is a tower that will not stand the pressure and will have to be broken. So I just did a very quick sampling rather than truly diving deep into the analysis of geopolitics to make it a little more concrete rather than abstract, and to also make now the following build on what we described in previous episode about the discovery labs, which is that we need two kind of discovery labs. We need forensic diagnostic labs, where we're trying to process and metabolize, yes, the high level meta maps of meanings, but not by leaving ourselves outside of that, rather integrating the interior dimension. So discovery labs where we do the decoding and the mapping of what is going on and why are we experiencing what can be described as a red, well, somewhat red, but more orange tendencies asserting themselves through the violet inside the context of an ending epoch. Orange in that to mean orange below the line, so orange above the line is the nourishing support of the nascent arising of whatever it is that you're doing. Now we're seeing that the system, Western system of liberal democracies is imploding because the institution of powers are lost credibility, and because the socio-economic contract that was fashioned after the Second World War emerged out of a certain set of values that had prudence and had discipline and had certain conservative reserve about themselves temperamentally. But those were the infrastructures that gave rise to the the extension of the me first, me last, all that I can grab from the system, liberal desire, liberal in that sense, not as a political, but in that it was liberated, that permission. And so what you saw there is that was blue system that emerged through modernity used up with orange tendencies. But the orange tendencies above the line is nourish and support the core of what is arising. The orange tendencies below the line, they take the nature of extensionalism to grab more power to grab larger territory, to control larger resources. So we're seeing those tendencies. And what has occurred through the end of the 20th century into the early 21st century, that while indigo was rising, the internet brought the modern phenomenology of the merging integration of all knowledge on the planet. Google became the initial exhibit A of that, and the latter expression of that is the ChatGPT and AI revolution. What that did, it proliferated an expression and a way of being and doing that got separated from the economic foundations of planetary limits. So we used up in such a short time so much of the planetary resources. And so the regressive pattern that we are seeing now is partly catalyzed because we were building a tower, the foundation of which is rotten, is broken. So in this sense, you're looking at the epochal function that the rise of Trump represents, and you may be personally on, say, the left liberal side of the political party, of the political system. So you can never be able to see anything from an epochal point of view, or you may be all for Trump if you're on the right side. Both views, the polarity, the polarization, and the quarreling sides fail to recognize, well, a lot of what he is doing may be very chaotic and horrible, and you can hate the way he's doing it and the way he brought the agency of Elon Musk into the White House, and what that does to try to break down the layers that were developed in the government, in the federal system. And then you can take a whole other view, which is somewhat detached, what I sometimes describe as the flying upside down view, and say, I'm not for that agenda, and I'm not against this agenda. I'm simply looking to decode what is playing out through this agenda. And what is playing out through this agenda is that he is breaking down. He is a tool of another process that needs to go through the system to facilitate the change that's underway. Now, that's very tricky in the way I say it, because it can be misunderstood to, in a way, be confirmatory of this process, which is not what it says. What it simply is inviting is what I'm describing in those two different discovery labs, that we need one that does the decoding, and then a different discovery lab that will begin to look at, okay, but you do need government systems, and you do need large public agreement, and you do need ways to verify truth, and you do need ways to support the next evolution of science, and you do need to build institutions that can work and support the public and support the free rise of the economic and the political and the cultural dimensions of society. So you need all those. So this is where you need to bring together a discovery lab that will deal more with, beyond the forensic decoding, with the experimentation and the prescribed solutions to try different ways of approaching this. There is a whole endeavor or network endeavor that arose in the middle of the second decade of the 21st century, which was called Game B endeavor. And I'm not here to talk to represent Game B, but essentially it was an impulse that said the paradigm of the modern system was captured by Game A, and what captured Game A was large economic interests that managed to corner and control the political and the cultural system. And there has to be a way to liberate those three, the economic, the political, and the cultural system, so they can co-arise. But actually, change is not going to happen from top down, change is going to happen from the bottom up. So then there has to be many different communal attempts that model and experiment and build prototypes of different systems that will facilitate the progression, the upgrade of what we're describing as the rise of a new epoch, essentially the emergence of a new epoch through the breakdown of the old epoch. So I'd say that that's the awareness that was behind this number 6. What would you want to say to that, please?
Well, as you know, we're working recently with a pod on the values and the challenges of democracy. And we are trying to be forensic on that through the lenses of what would be an operating system that will facilitate evolution. Because obviously the picture has changed. So there are very critical challenges to democracy, because in a way, the blue operating system of liberal democracies and free economies rose together after the Enlightenment with the rise of nations. So there was this idea that we identify with our nation, that we are homogeneous there. But with globalization and with the big migration waves, both economical and due to wars, there's a different picture. And it seems that the various democratic governments are not handling the issue very well, which leads more to kind of totalitarian side. And also, for instance, a lot of the operating system after the Second World War was in a bit based on the Cold War between America and Russia, and now there's not this Cold War. There's a different kind of war, maybe. Also, there is big economic inequality. So the middle class, that is in a way the basis of democracy, is not there. Plus, the people are not interested in politics, so they kind of abdicate from being involved in and having a say. So that allows more corruption of the representatives, which also cannot hold majority. So every now and then we have different governments. So there is no long-lasting vision. And often the parties, the different parties, they make deals in order to, be able to operate. There's of course a challenge of the artificial intelligence and the techno-feudalism and so on. and the big economic inequalities of richer becoming more rich and poorer becoming more poor. And also there was a basic part of democracy was the split of powers, and was also the separation from religion. So but that also had the negative that now there is no value, no adherence to a higher purpose, and also the different interests are co-opting the legislative and the judicial powers. So it would need, I don't know how many hours and how many people, and there are actually people that are creating think tanks on that at the highest level. But really to see it from the perspective of the epoch and what you are saying, I think it's a very original approach, and to see what would be a system that would respect human life, respect um, the greater biosphere and the greater ecology, and have an operating system that would facilitate life for real.
You're kind of covering the next several slides in what you are offering here. So let's bring Karen and then see if we're going to find a way to accelerate this, or we will end up needing to do part 3 and part 4. Please, Karen.
Well, I don't have a lot to say here other than this is very, very pertinent, and exactly these questions are why we kind of very happily gathered around a chamber of resolve and triage. It's we're talking about events happening this week that have turned things upside down. I live in the UK, and suddenly things are pressing in, and our Prime Minister's off to America, I believe, this week, and we're absolutely at a point where anything can happen. And really, all I can endorse is the strengthening and the aligning to the greater understandings of kind of shifts, epochal shifts, and how, as a human at this time, my own alignment and navigation can be aware and as best aligned. And this concept of discovery labs and other ideas that I think will unfold as this process evolves together. I use the word pertinent, and it is utterly, and I'm not going to profess to have any great intelligence at this point, so I will mute.
Yeah, well, the point you're making, Karen, which is going to lead me directly to the next slide, is this is why we began with self-leadership. Okay, so we lived through times where you could have in the middle of the 20th century, where you could have the illusion that the elite, the people in leadership, they knew what they were doing, and they supposedly had answers to the world's problems. Now we know they don't know what they're doing, and they don't have answers to the world problems. And so we need people, and there are people with expertise and know-how who congregate around different aspects of this large global picture, the various dimensions of the meta crisis. What we're inviting here is approaching a certain macro meta view with the help of the epochal perspective. So please, number 7.
Number 7. the indigo-violet ultimate shift. In the life of an individual, the ultimate indigo-violet moment is the final change of form through the portal of death. In the life of a nation, it might take the form of a revolutionary war or a fundamental collapse followed by re-emergence. In the broader context of civilization, several catalysts can unleash an ultimate indigo-violet shift. The emergence of AI and the drive towards AGI, artificial general intelligence, and ASI, artificial superintelligence, are not merely technological or socio-economic events. They fundamentally transform our relationship with life and the universe. Without a grounding in the core purposes of life and creational logic, these developments carry substantial civilizational risk. This too calls for a discovery lab.
So let's actually read number 8 and then talk about both.
Number 8, human life and its essential value. As AI capabilities continue to advance, potentially outperforming humans in nearly every task, humankind must ask, what is the inherent value of human life? Humanity now faces a violent Solomon test. Will we control the machines, or will these machines come to control us? Will we descend into a form of techno-feudalism, where a few techno-trillionaires govern machines that reduce humans to mere servants? Or will we give rise to a new phase in human evolution, one where human worth is measured not by economic output, but by our connection to the permanent lines of value in the universe? A new era of the Universalis human.
Okay, so we think these thoughts out loud, not to profess that we have an answer, so to speak, but to nevertheless refuse to close our eyes, refuse to be blinded by the actuality at a simple level that if indeed the advancement of artificial intelligence makes human capacity to do things in most or in many spaces at least irrelevant, then we would need to ask, what is the inherent value of human life? That becomes a question. And it's one way to approach this question from a socio-economic perspective, where you say, okay, we've got a problem, how will we manage the economy? How will we keep people alive? What will be the economic paradigm? That's one level, and it's an important and valid level. There is a whole other way of approaching this inquiry, which includes the spiritual dimension, that recognizes that the human model is, the human biological model is a way in which the spiritual life of human beings catalyzed evolution such that this part of the universe can go through the journey all the way from the Big Bang and the beginning of things to become a cradle for conscious life. And that the vision and the desire of some who see the biological model to be flawed because it reacts with emotions, and who therefore believe that you can create a silicon-based life who will not have the bugs of personality traits and temperaments and these sorts of things. They believe that the biological and emotional nature of human life is actually a flaw, a flawed structure in the evolutionary development, and that programming a silicon-based conscious human, so they believe, is the solution, the salvation for that. You can see how that is an outcome of 4 centuries of separation of the brain and the mind from the larger totality of human life, the whole human experience, and a separation of science, religion, and science, making those 2 essentially identical in the pursuit of truth and knowledge and understanding of life. That is to say, they arose from the same source, but became 2 warring camps, leading us to developing these distorted ideas. Now, what nobody has been able to solve in Silicon Valley is how do you integrate into, they call it the alignment problem. How will you make sure that whatever more sophisticated AI systems that will develop, how will they continue to serve humanity? Or will they become self-servant and will therefore make humans, because they will become a lot smarter than humans, will make humans servants and slaves? Because right next to artificial intelligence, what is missing is aligned and attuned wisdom. Intelligence without alignment, intelligence without wisdom, it can be as satanic and as degenerative as it is intelligent. Because intelligence doesn't necessarily guarantee at all perennial alignment to the perennial transcendental values of truth and beauty and goodness and the wisdom of facilitating these. So what essentially promoted these last 2 slides about AI was the recognition that this question is no longer in the distant future, it is right here, right now. At least at the moment, we seem to be way behind our capacity to address this, because what happened is that technologically, we've been hijacked. You could say that humanity has been hijacked, where 2 development lines went ahead a lot faster than all other development lines. The line of the technological and the financialization of the economy, these 2 developmental lines got separated by greed and by the motivations that inspire these. So we now have a humanity that's very, very developed in certain aspects, but with governmental systems and ethical development and moral development not being able to catch up to these new actuality. So we're facing this right here, right now, and I don't know that we certainly here and have any wise solution to offer. What we are claiming the right to do is to ask the question. And the question we are asking, will we allow human life to be reduced to be servant of the technology and the machines, or is there a way to actually unlock through this something else, a whole new evolutionary possibility where human life is seen for its universal value in the context of our connection and upholding and abiding with permanent lines of value. And I recognize we need to do a whole separate episode about the permanent lines of value in the universe to actually ground this in something that is a little more concrete and not abstract. But one way to, we touched this in an earlier episode, perhaps, is when we describe, I don't remember if it's in a Universalis conversation or in one of the portals into the soul events, but we touched a little bit the permanent lines of value in the universe in recognizing that this universe loves learning. This universe loves the aggregation and development and refinement of knowledge and wisdom. It loves beauty. It loves the refinement of beauty and all other permanent lines of value, including then it loves the fidelity of form. We see that it supports daffodil to become a new daffodil, to give rise to a new daffodil, and the next day and the day after that, it is still a daffodil. It is not becoming a rose or a tulip. So there is something about fidelity of form. There is something about the fact that there are permanent lines of behavior. The mama bear and the mama dolphin, they both love their young and take care of their young. But we don't see a dolphin becoming a shark or a shark becoming a dolphin, so there is fidelity to form. I know the geneticists between us will tell us that the genetic formation doesn't allow them to create that variance. Correct. I assert that there is something about fidelity of form and expression in biological life of being true to the line of its origination that is a universal value, and that the AI revolution represents, if as taken by some to replace the line, the human line, starting with the fact that young children will learn not with another human being, but through a computer, and will perhaps get a completely different concepts of themselves in the process, because central to our humanity has been the aspect of generational transmission from one generation raising another generation, raising another generation. So if that line is broken, then the fidelity of form, the transmission of the fidelity of form, and that permanent line of value is broken. And there is something about the fidelity of form and the fidelity of function and the fidelity of value. Those, they have a continuous, this is, when we talk about creational logic, that's what it means. Creational logic is where this sequential reasoning arises. So we went here a little bit out on a limb, and I wonder if there is anything you want to say about that, please.
This is a huge one. After hearing this yesterday, and thinking about it, it caused me to write a poem rallying for the human cause. It was as a counterbalance, I think, to the I want to call this the reality, but this well, that's another whole question. Which is the reality? But looking at, well, I'm going to read one little verse. I'm not going to read the whole poem, but it sums up some of the thoughts here. We are the humans of creation intent, not defined through an intellect copied in form, but defying of all that is repressive and limiting. And then it can, well, in a way, the writing starts with many things we covered in the first recording to do with the self-aligning and the ability to reconfigure and be self-authored, and moving on through the deeper levels of being a creational human, and how, as such, we can make a stance, we can adhere to what we believe as what will allow life, and what are the human incredible design faculties that are established. Well, this is the huge territory where we are touching the spiritual soul levels and the creation intent that is imbued within the human model of what our partnership, which we've talked about through our connective act and art, can actually allow to flow into humanity and effect change and connect more with the universe and be an agentic self-authored player, not an automatum or an automatic created being. In a human intelligence is an extraordinary gift of dimensions that we can only touch enough in a way to know and believe in. I feel a bit, I'm not quite saying what I want to say here, but it's enough to say I'm rallying for the human.
You are, Karen. Thank you. And I only managed to open your poem that you sent about an hour before our call, and actually highlighted the paragraph, the 3 lines or whatever it is that you just read. I was going to bring it myself at some point to the call, so I'm glad you did. Please, Kiriki.
Yes, I'm in full agreement. This is a very big issue. It's permeating all facets of life. So AI is not just a tool that, let's say, has a direct impact on only on the work, let's say, on the way we work, but it also impacts our free time, impacts the way we think, impacts the way we learn, and it offers good things as well, but I think it needs to be regulated. Unfortunately, the people that are supposed to regulate it don't know about it, so they don't have enough knowledge about how it works to be able to regulate it. And there is a risk that we might be controlled by machines because they don't have, we need to go to sleep, we need to eat. They just operate all the time. So, of course, and I think the question of what is the inherent value of human life is very important, because for many centuries people identified themselves with the work they did. So they say, what are you? I'm a doctor, or I'm a teacher, or I'm a painter, or I'm a lawyer. Now a lot of these jobs will be done by computers or by robots or AI. And I know, for instance, in the bank I was working, the tellers are ATMs, the telephonists are, again, algorithms. The people in the dealing room, they're also algorithms. So all the jobs are taken by machines. So if we are not our job, then what are we? Instead of our job. So that is also, but this is a huge, big issue that needs a separate conversation, I think.
Well, I think we said about half a dozen different things here that we need to come back to do a deep dive. So let me lead to number 9, and we will probably land with number 9. I need to get to do a separate one, part 3, that we will get back to another time. So here is number 9.
Please, Kira.
Number 9, the currency of the future. If humanity can safely navigate the coming violent economic and social upheaval and give rise to systems that support our highest universal nature and potential, then our true currency will be our capacity to birth new living connections, perceptions, and emergent configurations of wisdom, truth, goodness, and beauty. Let's work with that vision in mind, finding a golden tethering inside, being devotionally aligned to humanity's divine potential, and attuned to the current of evolution and to the sacred realms that bless human possibility.
Okay, so we promised at the beginning that we will get to the 3 tetherings. Here they are, being tethered inside, because we started with self-leadership, being devotionally aligned to humanity's divine potential. Okay, so that's the second tethering, including myself and including everybody else in my thoughts. And thirdly, attuned to the current of evolution and the sacred realms that bless human possibility, which is a way of saying I include all future generations and I include all sentient beings in the biological and beyond the biological realm. So can humanity move forward with this in mind? Well, to move forward with this in mind, there will have to be a new socio-economic paradigm, because it's a socio-economic paradigm that governs the way of life. So what we suggest here is that if we are, as a humanity, and I have no choice but to be not just filled with optimism about the future, but filled with confidence about the future, because I love my grandkids and their grandkids in a way that will not allow me to have any other stance, but to believe in humanity's capacity to come through the economic and social upheaval that we are likely to face in the coming decades. We are facing, and will continue to face upheaval, and that if there is a way to imagine the next 2-3 decades as some kind of a birthing crucible where humanity will be prepared to give rise to its next iteration, one that's wiser, one that's closer aligned to truth, one that's more deeply imbued with goodness and with beauty, then inside that context, the true currency is the capacity to give rise, to propagate these properties in the universe and here in life. It means we will raise our children and grandchildren to serve life, and it means serving oneself and serving life are not two separate objects, rather they are an integrated whole. And it means human arising to unlock and integrate the capacity to do so as an individual, not by relapsing to tribal entity where you have no choice, where you are a servant of a tribal configuration in which you had no individuated capacity. So that means we are describing humanity that will consecrate human life beyond all the extraordinary output that a large learning model that processed and was programmed to process all the knowledge in the universe can just spit out in a second. Last time I dropped something into ChatGPT, it told me thought for 3 seconds or thought for 7 seconds. Great. So, I mean, it has an extraordinary capacity. Wonderful. And it can help us in so many ways. It can help us solve many problems. The challenge we face is how do we give rise to a human way of life that will use these capacities rather than be subject to these capacities. And I'm proposing that the currency of that world tomorrow is one where we discover the deepest sense of appreciation and beauty in the love of what a human is and what the human represents, what we represent to each other, what we represent to the generations before us because of how we have harvested their journey, and what we represent for the generations to follow us. So we are at a very dramatic and cannot overemphasize or over-dramatize it, because our forecasters will look back and will either, well, first of all, there will be forecasters, there will be next generations to look back at us, and we hope they look back and say, well, this was a wise ancestral generation because they truly decided to love the human form and its significance in the universe, and pledged allegiance to to the creational cause that gave rise to human life, and decided to transcend their foolish selfishness and aggrandized self-gratification of the near term, one that's prepared to consume everything in terms of planetary resources, but even more than that, consume life itself. In other words, we hope future generations will look back and will say, that was a great generation because they elected for life instead of anti-life. They've given rise to a currency that can be admitted by the universe at large. They supported life. That is the spirit behind this. And as I listen to what I'm saying, it does ring as a closing note. And that means we will have to come back to do 10, 11, and 12 on part 3. Today, we only got to accomplish part 1 and part 2. I'd invite you to make any closing comments on our journey today through part 1 and part 2. That is Universalis 22 and Universalis 23, please.
A very short note to thank you, and also to say that the value of the 1,000 faces of Homo Universalis is exactly in that multiplicity that we have, that we are not one-dimensional beings, and that can allow us to overcome fear and to see the multiple range of things. And if we don't manage to be ourselves 1,000 faces, then we have each other, so we can also be the bigger conclave to face the challenges. That's what I would say.
Yeah, I would say to value both the challenges and the aspirations, because they both have a part. And one sense with the configurations of wisdom, truth, goodness, and beauty. You spoke of the fidelity of form, and that resonated through some recent work on constancy. And it's because of that the human has the universalis human has the ability to change things and to configure things. There's the yielding and the softness and the creativity, inherent potential within human life that is unique, part of the deeper creational human purpose that can give birth to what I call, well, we can create new constellations that can go within our self-leadership, within our groupings together, and throughout the whole universe. The human has that potential, which we are touching on in the Universalis work. So our stage is not limited to this time, this planet, these problems. It's something else, utterly extraordinary. So thank you very much.
Thank you both. So how about if we bring this home with this imagery that we hold in our mind eye, the view of future generations, looking back at us, nodding with a smile, and smile of validation and gratitude that we have found a way to not destroy this planet. And we've found a way to support life. And they are the benefactors of that. And they also, by the way, look at us and another part of themselves can't for the life of them understand how foolish so many of our humankind were at this time to not see that. But with gratitude and forgiveness, humanity has seen the way forward and averted civilizational collapse. Let us end this here, and I will just give you a brief heads up. In Universalis 24, we will talk about a nascent renaissance, and we will then go further on some of the behavioral briefs of how to manage the near to midterm. To be continued. Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you, Aviv. Till next.
Along with our website at portalsofperception.org, Portals is also available on YouTube and on all podcast platforms, as well as social media. You can become an active member and join the conversation in community events. And you can help us get the word out by liking this content and by sharing it with your friends.